Hi, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for that introduction. I'd like to thank Black Tech Week for inviting me. I'd like to thank Felicia, Lola, I think Derek for inviting me today. And I'm from New York, so I flew in yesterday, so I'm excited to be here, obviously, not only for the great weather, to also be with you today. It's a great, exciting time to be an entrepreneur. I remember sitting in a very similar seat as you 10 years ago. I used to walk around with my executive summary for my business, and then I would eagerly give it to investors or anyone who was interested in the ideas I'm working on. And I think what you have today in this community is something that I didn't have, which are people who are like-minded and who have similar interests and similar backgrounds as you. So please don't underestimate how important it is for you to share your own network and help each other on this particular journey. So I was born in Nigeria. I moved here when I was 16 years old. My dad's a professor, so we kind of jumped from one city to the next. And 18 months ago, in 2013, the company I started, Hubstop.com, was sold to Apple. And in between those years, I've learned quite a few things and made quite a few other mistakes. So what I'd like to do today is to just share with you, I only have 10 minutes, just share with you 3 key elements, I think, in terms of creating a valuable company that hopefully will eventually get sold one day. But before I do that, I'd love to just give you a quick narrative of my own experience as an entrepreneur and how I started Hubstop. So I graduated from Syracuse, an undergraduate degree, and I moved to New York. And for those of you who've been to New York, you know it's a large city with very complex subway systems and streets, etc. So I remember having to go on a date on the Lower East Side, and I just couldn't figure out exactly how to do it. I had the subway map, but I couldn't figure out, well, how do I actually get to this restaurant? And I don't quite recall how my date went, but I actually remember what I did the very first thing on the next day when I woke up. Is I went to the subway station, I got a subway map. And I laid the subway map on the floor of my apartment in Brooklyn. And I figured, well, there must be some way for me to describe the subway system in a way that a developer could actually work on it. So that's what I did. I got my Excel spreadsheet. I studied, because that's all I use as a finance guy, right? Okay, how do I do tables, routes? And I just kind of figured out how to do it. I went on Elance. I found a developer in Russia to build the very first prototype of the site. And 6 months later, we had the very first functional Hubstop. So that's how it started, and obviously it grew over the next couple of years. I left the company in 2009 to go work in Ghana and Nigeria doing private equity. Then I just moved back 2 years ago to focus on a lab to basically create internet companies. So that's what I'm currently working on. So back to the 3 key points. I only have 10 minutes, so I'll try to be really as quick and as efficient as possible. So the first one is actually the most important in my own experience in terms of how to create a company of value. So I'll walk through 3 of them. The first one is nurture your imagination. The next one is have clarity of your intent. And the third one is to build slowly, then quickly. Again, the first one is actually the most important advice I have for you guys as you go on this personal journey. Is that there's something about the way society works and how you get, how people treat you as kids and then as adults, where everyone's managed towards expectations. They expect you to believe a certain things, they expect you to act a certain way, they expect you to think a certain way. And those expectations are the very limiting factor to lots of people's success. So the key is, just because something is expected doesn't mean that it really captures what's possible. And I would urge all of you to really not think about what is expected or what's the average value of things, but really what are the extremes of possibilities. And the ability to nurture your imagination and creativity and for you to think differently is the very heart of wealth in society. So the more differently you think, the more opportunities you see. I can tell you that if you nurture your imagination, right, you would see things that are obvious to you that everyone else is blind to. And when you find those opportunities, those are the great big ideas in front of you. So please remember that. And you may ask the question, well, if creativity and imagination are so important in terms of being able to create wealth, what do I actually do to nurture that imagination? And the answer to that question is actually, to answer that question, you actually have to think back to a time when you didn't need to ask such a question, right? So usually as a child, right, you played, right? No, you didn't get instructions on how to play, you just did. And in those moments, those were moments of innate creative expression. And I think for each of you, you have to figure out what kinds of things you need to do to nurture your imagination. I personally listen to music. I like reading a variety of topics from anywhere from science to mechanics to mathematics, right? And also travel and just having dialogues with interesting people. But for each of you, you have to figure out what areas, what activities allows your mind to be playful and be creative. That I can't overemphasize this enough. It really is the source of infinite wealth. It is a source of infinite potential. You'll never run out of imagination. So really figure a way to nurture it. And the way the school systems work, the way social networks are formed, they don't really allow you to really play and be imaginative. So that's the first one. So now that you have a great idea, what's the next step? Next thing you need to do is to have clarity of intent. A couple of things you need to think about is obviously, there are many reasons to start an internet company. You could do it for, to create something, to help a particular group of people. But for the most, a lot of people do internet companies to create something that's valuable, but also at the end of the day to hopefully create some financial success or reward at the end. So if that's the case, and that's what you've chosen to do, then you obviously have to think about the size of the market you're addressing, right? So a simple way of thinking about this situation is, how many people is my product or service going to help? And then like how much would they value this? So that's kind of the easiest thing to think about. But if a part of this journey is to create wealth for yourself, then you do have to think about the market size, right? Because that's going to be what's going to drive your financial returns at the end. It shouldn't be the only, but to the extent that it's something that's important to you, you definitely have to think about that. So the other is your customer, knowing your customer, being very, very clear on your customer. So one of the companies that I started right after business school was a company called AfriDAC. The whole point of AfriDAC was to allow a financial platform to allow the trading of financial assets like money markets and FX, right, in Africa. So we're business school students. We thought we knew what we were doing. Like, okay, the market is this large, it's so inefficient, etc. But when we raised some seed money and we went down to Nigeria, and what we found is that while it made sense on paper, the corporate treasurers and the bank treasurers were in cahoots with each other, right? So again, I give you that's an extreme example, but each customer behaves in a very interesting way. So you really have to understand the customer before you actually believe you have a market opportunity. So the reason why understanding the market size and understanding the specific about your customer is so important is because it allows you to have conviction, right? You'll need conviction to go on this personal journey, which is filled with all kinds of dangers and good times and ups and down times. But you also need it to convince investors, right? You need to convince investors to give you money, and your clarity around what market you're going after and the exact customer you're going after is going to be key to that. And you also need to have conviction to be able to hire and recruit good people as well. So you have a great idea, you have clarity about your intentions. The next thing you need to do is now you have to actually build the company. So my advice on that front is a couple of things. So I'll just list them. So I'm just make sure I use the time efficiently. The first one is build for yourself, right? So I used to get lost in our own house in Nigeria. That just shows you how bad I am with directions. Like, I'm really bad with directions. And it's because that I was building a product for myself, allowed me to create a company that people would actually enjoy, because I knew exactly what my frustrations were. I didn't know where left and right was. I was really bad. And it's when you build for yourself, you actually know that once you've built it, that it's something that's going to be valuable for other people who are in a similar situation and to yourself. And so if you can build for yourself, then I would say make sure you're getting paid to build. And the reason why that's important is that that's the only way to make sure that the things you're coding and the things you're conceptualizing are actually valuable to someone else, right? Obviously, those are the best two scenarios, but to the extent you can, if you can't do that, if your idea is outside your sphere of influence and you can't have a paying customer, obviously, then you'll have to do it. But to the extent that you can, those are probably the two best ways to make sure you're building something of value. So the next tip is focus on the best of breeds. So when I started Hopstop, the leader in the mapping space then was a company, I'm not sure if you guys still remember, was MapQuest, right? So I looked at MapQuest designs, figured out how they approach the user experience, and I borrowed a lot from that, from the user interface. So each of you with your different products and services, there are probably one or two or three companies that are really best of breeds, right? Right in front of you is literally millions of dollars of R&D, of product management, of A/B testing that's observable to you as external people. So take that, just obviously modify it to the extent you want, but it's a great base to build your company. Then the third piece of advice is kind of don't write code until you know exactly what you want to build, right? So I personally use a service called Echeruo. It's an app, but basically allows you to build non-functioning prototypes. And I can't, again, emphasize this enough, right? Once you write a line of code, you've just made it so much hard to change. And something that could have taken 1 hour on the design stage, right, when it's just prototypes, right, could take literally up to a month when you actually have functioning code. So I would urge you to really look at ways to recreate the customer experience or recreate the products that you want to eventually go into the marketplace and get as much feedback from users, from investors as possible to really get that process down before you actually write a single line of code. Then the last piece of advice in terms of building a company is make sure you find a rockstar developer or team before you start building. I know it's a tough situation because in some ways you really want to have a prototype you can show investors and employees, etc. And you may not be a developer yourself. I certainly am not a developer, so you actually have to rely on people to do that. But the problem with that approach is just getting anyone who can build a prototype is that, so they assume that you are successful with raising money, right? So you have money, you have maybe some team members, now you need to build for the next milestone. If you haven't proven that your development team or your developer can actually produce quality code on time, well, you find you'll have a burn rate, the clock starts ticking, and you have X number of months to deliver on the product. And if those people let you down, then your entire reputation, the fact that you've taken other people's money, and all this is at stake. So spend the time to find and test other developers and development teams before you actually start building the website. So again, just to summarize, a couple of things you have to do to build a successful company. First one is like nurture your imagination. The second one is have clarity of intent of exactly what you want to do, why you want to do it. And the third one is build slowly so you can actually then build very fast. It's going to be an interesting journey. You're going to have ups and downs down the road, but I think I did it, and I think everyone here with enough perseverance and enough luck will also do the same. So best of luck, and thank you very much.